Get this filthy creature off my server!
Sir, I'm an intern. I'm trying to stop...
You? Stop what?
Gerald Whitmore's lips curled into a sneer.
Look at you. You stink. You look like you just crawled out of a trash can. And you dare mess with my hundreds of millions of dollars worth of systems?
Please, just check the logs.
Shut up!
He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a growl.
Why should I believe a stinking, filthy rat like you? Disgusting! Call the police! Tell them we caught a street rat sabotaging our server.
Someone in the hallway chuckled. A phone was raised to record. Ivy Dawson said nothing. 72 hours. No sleep. No food. No one answered her phone. She saved 4 million accounts. They handcuffed her, but no one in that building knew what awaited them. 74 hours earlier, Ivy Dawson was mopping the floor of server room B. That was the real job, not the title on her badge, junior IT intern, but the truth everyone understood without saying it. She fetched coffee for engineers who never learned her name. She organized cables by color because someone thought it looked neater. She wiped down equipment that senior staff treated like museum exhibits, precious enough to protect, too boring to maintain themselves. 3 months into her internship, and the most complex task anyone had trusted her with was resetting a forgotten password. She didn't complain, not once, because every night after her shift, Ivy went home to a studio apartment the size of a parking space and cracked open her laptop. Cybersecurity courses, ethical hacking certifications, network defense simulations. She paid for them herself. $40 a month she carved from a paycheck that barely covered rent and ramen. Her notebook, a beaten-up composition book with a cracked spine and coffee stains on the cover, was filled front to back. Handwritten network diagrams, attack trees with branching red arrows, incident response flowcharts built from case studies she'd downloaded from NIST, notes and margins so tight you'd need a magnifying glass to read them. Nobody at Greystone Systems knew any of this. To them, she was the quiet black girl who mopped and nodded. Friday, 11:17 p.m. Ivy was alone in server room B, running her usual end-of-week check. Routine stuff, temperature logs, disk usage, uptime reports. The monitoring dashboard blinked yellow, then orange, then red. She leaned forward. 14 alerts in 90 seconds. Unauthorized access attempts hammering the firewall from multiple IP addresses scattered across 3 continents. Port scans sweeping the East Wing database cluster, the one holding financial records for 4 million clients. Social security numbers, bank routing information, mortgage balances, college savings accounts. Ivy's stomach dropped. She grabbed her phone, called Neil Grayson, IT lead. 4 rings. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Called Pamela Archer, CTO. Straight to voicemail. Not even a personal greeting, just the default robotic tone. Called Trent Holloway, her direct manager. He picked up on the 3rd ring. She could hear a children's choir in the background. Trent, we have a breach. Multiple IPs, East Wing cluster. It looks coordinated. Dawson, slow down. It's probably a false alarm. Run the standard diagnostic. It's not a false alarm. I'm watching 14 simultaneous... I'm at my kid's recital. Email me the results. I'll check Monday. He hung up. Ivy stared at her phone. The alerts were now firing every 3 seconds, stacking on top of each other like dominoes. She opened the diagnostic panel and ran a deep scan. The results came back in 40 seconds. This was not a false alarm. This was a coordinated, multi-vector attack by someone who had studied Greystone's architecture and knew exactly where the soft spots lived. She had two choices: go home, write an email, follow protocol. Let whatever was going to happen, happen. Nobody would blame the intern. Nobody expected the intern to do anything at all. Or stay. Ivy pulled her notebook from her backpack, flipped to the section on lateral movement containment, a page she'd handwritten from a Sands Institute lecture at 2 a.m. 3 months ago. She sat down at the main terminal and started typing. Hour 1 through 12. The attackers probed the perimeter with automated scripts, testing every port, every gateway, every unpatched service. Ivy identified the entry vector within the first hour, a misconfigured API gateway that the senior engineering team had flagged in a meeting 3 months ago. The patch had been assigned to Neil Grayson. It was still sitting in his task queue, untouched. Ivy wrote the patch herself, deployed it. Then she began isolating the compromised nodes one by one, cutting lateral pathways before the infection could reach the core database. By 3 a.m. Saturday, she had contained the first wave. She walked to the vending machine down the hall. Granola bar, Red Bull. Her phone showed 0 callbacks. She ate, standing up, leaning against the wall, and went back in. Hour 12 through 36. They changed tactics. The automated scripts stopped. A human operator took over on the other end. Someone skilled, patient, precise. Whoever this was had done this before. They deployed a custom ransomware payload, encrypted with a rotating key and obfuscated behind layers of legitimate-looking traffic. It slipped past the first firewall layer before Ivy caught the anomaly, a tiny spike in CPU usage on a node that should have been idle. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She pulled the payload apart line by line, working in a sandboxed environment she built herself from scratch. Reverse engineered the encryption logic, found the vulnerability in the key rotation cycle, wrote a counterpatch by hand. No template, no playbook, no senior engineer watching over her shoulder. Just her notebook, and 2 years of midnight studying. By Sunday morning, the ransomware was dead. Her hands were shaking. She hadn't slept in 36 hours. The vending machine was empty. She refilled her water bottle from the bathroom sink and splashed cold water on her face. In the mirror, her eyes were bloodshot. She looked like a ghost. She went back to the terminal. Hour 36 through 60. The third wave hit like a battering ram. A massive DDoS attack flooded the external network, cover fire, while a separate team simultaneously attempted data exfiltration through a legacy backup port that wasn't even listed on the current architecture map. Ivy found it by accident, an outbound traffic spike that didn't match any scheduled process or known service. She traced it in 11 minutes. Then she did something no intern was ever supposed to do. She physically disconnected 2 server racks, pulled the cables out with her bare hands, her fingertips catching on sharp connector edges, rewired the backup systems through a clean switch she found buried in a storage closet behind boxes of old keyboards. The server room now looked like the aftermath of a hurricane. Cables draped everywhere, monitors dragged to the edge of tables, 3 chairs pushed together as a makeshift desk. Her notebook opened to 4 different pages held down by empty Red Bull cans. Between attacks, she called Gerald Whitmore. The CEO's direct number was printed on the emergency contact sheet taped to the wall next to the fire extinguisher. 11:30 p.m. Saturday. No answer. 2:15 a.m. Sunday. No answer. 4 a.m. Sunday. No answer. Gerald Whitmore spent Saturday on the golf course at Pinehurst. 18 holes, steak dinner, Sunday brunch with 2 board members. He saw 3 missed calls from an unknown number. He swiped them away without a second thought. Hours 60 through 72. The final assault. Everything at once. DDoS, exfiltration, credential stuffing, a fresh ransomware variant. The attackers knew they were losing. They threw every tool they had at whatever was holding the line. Ivy was running on nothing. Her vision blurred, her hands cramped. She typed commands from muscle memory, one hand on the keyboard and the other tracing flowcharts in her notebook. At one point, she realized she'd been holding her breath for almost a minute. At 3:41 a.m. Monday, the last intrusion attempt failed. Ivy stared at the confirmation screen. All sectors secured. 0 data breach. 4 million accounts untouched. She picked up a pen and wrote the last entry in her notebook, her handwriting barely legible, shaking from exhaustion. Threat neutralized. No one's coming. No one knows. But the servers are safe. She put her head down on the keyboard, closed her eyes, and didn't move for 3 hours. At 6:47 a.m., Gerald Whitmore's Mercedes pulled into his reserved spot. He walked into the building in a pressed navy suit, coffee from the Italian place on 5th, briefcase in his left hand. Board meeting at 9, investor call at 11. A good Monday. He passed server room B. The door was open. He looked inside, and everything he saw confirmed everything he already believed. He didn't read the logs. He didn't check the system status. He didn't call Neil Grayson, Pamela Archer, or anyone who could have told him what had actually happened in this room over the last 72 hours. He saw a black intern surrounded by destruction with admin access she wasn't supposed to have, and he made the only call that made sense to him. While Gerald spoke to police dispatch, Neil Grayson pulled into the parking lot 11 minutes late. He walked past the lobby, saw the cluster of employees by the elevator, saw Ivy being led out in handcuffs, saw Gerald standing by the door with his arms crossed and his jaw set. Neil went straight to server room B, sat down at the terminal, opened the master log. His face went white. 14,000 intrusion attempts, every single one blocked. Malware reverse-engineered and neutralized. Firewalls rebuilt from scratch. Backup infrastructure rerouted through clean pathways. All of it. Every patch, every countermeasure, every line of defense, executed by one user account. I.Dawson_intern. Neil picked up the phone. His hand was shaking. Gerald, you need to drop those charges, right now, because the person you just arrested is the only reason this company still exists. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax. Ivy sat in a plastic chair, bolted to the concrete floor, her wrists raw and reddened from the handcuffs they'd finally removed 20 minutes ago. A fluorescent tube above her buzzed in a broken rhythm. On, flicker, on, flicker. She hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days, hadn't showered, hadn't slept more than 3 hours on a keyboard. Her Greystone ID badge still hung around her neck, the laminated photo of her smiling face on her first day mocking every single thing about this moment. Detective Harlan Wells sat across from her with a yellow legal pad, a styrofoam cup of black coffee, and a look that said he'd already decided what had happened before she opened her mouth. Walk me through it again. Ivy took a slow breath. Her throat was sandpaper. Friday night, 11:17 p.m., The monitoring system flagged 14 simultaneous intrusion attempts targeting our East Wing database in English, please. Pretend I'm not a computer person. Hackers were breaking into the company's servers. I was the only person in the building. I stopped them. Wells tapped his pen against the pad. For 72 hours. Yes. Alone. Yes. And nobody at the company knew you were there. I called 4 people. My manager, the IT lead, the CTO, the CEO. Nobody answered. Nobody called me back. Wells leaned back in his chair until it creaked. He didn't write any of it down. Here's what I've got from your employer. Unauthorized access to restricted systems. Admin privileges you were never cleared for. Physical tampering with server hardware. Racks disconnected, cables pulled, backup infrastructure rerouted without approval. And a CEO who says, and I'm quoting here, you were systematically destroying company property. He's wrong. He's also the one pressing charges, and he's very confident. Ivy closed her eyes. The fluorescent buzz filled the silence like static. When she opened them, her voice didn't waver. Check the server logs. Every single action I took is time-stamped. Every intrusion I blocked is recorded. Every patch I wrote is saved. If I was destroying the system, there wouldn't be a system left to check. Wells stared at her for a long moment. His pen hovered above the pad. Then, for the first time in the entire interview, he started writing. Back at Greystone Systems, Neil Grayson was tearing Gerald Whitmore's story apart, one log entry at a time. He'd pulled the complete forensic timeline from the master server and printed everything. 47 pages of system logs, time-stamped to the millisecond. He spread them across the main conference table like prosecution evidence. Pamela Archer, the CTO, stood beside him with her reading glasses low on her nose, scanning each page in silence. She hadn't spoken in 4 minutes. Neil. Her voice was barely above a whisper. This is a state-level attack, possibly nation-state. The encryption on this ransomware. I've only seen this signature twice in my career, and both times it was attributed to organized groups operating out of Eastern Europe. And she beat it. She didn't just beat it. She reverse-engineered a rotating key encryption scheme by hand, in real time, while simultaneously managing a DDoS mitigation and a data exfiltration block on a port that isn't even on our current architecture map. Pamela took off her glasses and set them on the table. I have engineers with 15 years of experience and 6-figure salaries who couldn't do what she did. I'm not sure I could have done it. Neil picked up his phone and called Gerald. It rang 4 times. He called again. Gerald picked up on the second ring. Gerald, you need to drop the charges. Right now. She had admin access she was never supposed to. She escalated her own privileges because none of us answered the goddamn phone, Gerald. I didn't answer. Pamela didn't answer. Trent told her to send an email. And you? She called you 3 times. Saturday night, Sunday morning. You didn't pick up once. Silence on the line. A long, hollow silence. She saved our entire database. 4 million client accounts, financial records, social security numbers, mortgage data, medical payment histories, every single byte intact. If she hadn't been in that room, we would be looking at a $200 million breach, a class action lawsuit, and a federal investigation that would end this company. Instead, we have 0 data loss because a 21-year-old intern did our jobs for us, for free, for 3 days straight, without sleep. without food, without anyone even knowing her name. And you put her in handcuffs. Gerald's voice came back, clipped and tight. Come to my office, 20 minutes. Drop the charges first. A pause. I'll call legal. The charges vanished by 4 p.m. No press release, no public statement. Gerald's legal team made it disappear. A phone call to the precinct, a quiet conversation with the district attorney's office, a sealed file. Fast and silent, like it never happened. Except it did. And Ivy Dawson had the raw marks on her wrists to prove it. Gerald sent Trent Holloway, the manager who'd hung up on her, to watch a children's choir, to deliver the company's olive branch. The offer? Come back. Same desk, same internship, same title. Pretend none of this ever happened. Trent found her at a bus stop 2 blocks from the station. She was sitting on the metal bench with her backpack between her feet, staring at the cracked sidewalk. Her hands were in her lap. She looked smaller than he remembered. He stood in front of her in his pressed khakis and company polo, shifting his weight. Ivy, the company wants you to know that the misunderstanding has been fully resolved. We'd like to welcome you back to your position effective immediately, and we're prepared to offer a formal letter of apology from Mr. Whitmore personally, along with, I said no. Trent blinked. Can I ask why? Ivy looked up at him. Her eyes were still bloodshot. There were dark circles carved deep under them. You hung up on me, Trent. I called you and told you the building was under attack, and you hung up to watch your kids sing. That's your choice. I'm not angry about it. But don't stand here in your nice polo and call what happened a misunderstanding. I was dragged out of that building in handcuffs in front of everyone. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice someone made. She picked up her backpack, put it over one shoulder, and walked to the bus without looking back. 4 days later, Ivy walked into the law office of Nora Caldwell on the 7th floor of a brownstone on Maple Avenue. Nora was 53. Sharp jaw, silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight knot. 22 years of civil rights litigation had given her a face that corporate lawyers recognized the way prey recognizes a predator, immediately and with great unease. She'd heard about Ivy's arrest from a paralegal who'd seen the booking report. She called Ivy the same day and took the case pro bono before Ivy finished her second sentence. The confrontation was set for Thursday at 2 p.m. Nora's conference room, walnut table, leather chairs, framed verdicts on the wall. Gerald arrived with 2 corporate attorneys in matching gray suits and matching expressions of practiced neutrality. He carried a leather portfolio and the quiet arrogance of a man who believed money could still make this go away. Ivy arrived with Nora and her notebook. Gerald sat down and immediately leaned forward. We're prepared to offer a generous settlement package that reflects, We're not here for your money, Nora said. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. My client has 4 conditions. They are non-negotiable. You have 72 hours to accept all 4. I chose that number deliberately. Gerald's lawyers exchanged a glance. Ivy opened her notebook to a page near the back, a fresh page where she'd written each condition in her own hand in clean block letters. She read them aloud. Her voice was calm. Her eyes stayed on Gerald. 1. You apologize to me in person, in front of every employee at Greystone Systems, not an email, not a company memo. You stand in front of the same people who watched me get walked out in handcuffs, and you tell them exactly what happened, what really happened. Gerald's jaw clenched. 2. Greystone establishes a $2 million scholarship fund for students of color pursuing cybersecurity education. Named, funded, legally binding, within 90 days. One of the gray suits uncapped a pen and started writing. 3. I receive a full-time position, title and compensation that reflects what I actually did for this company, not what you assumed I was capable of doing. Gerald opened his mouth. Nora raised a single finger. He closed it. 4. You commission an independent third-party audit of Greystone's entire incident response protocol and publish the results internally. Every employee, from the newest intern to the CEO, sees exactly how the system failed that weekend and exactly who failed with it. The room went still. Gerald looked to his lawyers. They whispered. Something about liability exposure and precedent risk. Gerald's face tightened. Nora folded her hands on the table. Let me simplify this for everyone. My client has 72 hours of time-stamped server logs documenting every action she took. She has phone records showing every unanswered call. She has booking photographs from her arrest. And as of yesterday morning, she has a preliminary FBI forensic report confirming her actions prevented a data breach conservatively estimated at $200 million. She paused to let the number land. You can accept 4 reasonable conditions and keep your company intact. Or you can negotiate. And by tomorrow morning, every news outlet in this country will be running the story of how Gerald Whitmore called the police on the only person who saved his business because he looked at her and saw a criminal instead of a hero. The silence in that room had weight. You could feel it pressing down on the table. Gerald stared across at Ivy. She held his gaze without moving. No anger, no trembling, just the quiet, immovable composure of a woman who had survived the worst 72 hours of her life and walked out with every receipt. He looked down first. Ivy placed her notebook on the table between them. The cracked spine, the coffee-stained cover. Everything I did is documented in here. Every hour, every decision, every call I made that no one picked up. You can read it whenever you're ready. Gerald's eyes went to the notebook. He didn't reach for it, but he didn't say no. 72 hours later, down to the minute, his legal team sent the signed agreement to Nora Caldwell's office. Healing and Rebuilding Trust. Sevendard Whitmore stood in front of 214 employees on a Tuesday morning and read from a piece of paper. The all-hands meeting had been called at 9 a.m. No agenda listed. No subject line, just a calendar invite from Gerald's assistant with 2 words, mandatory, attendance. People filed into the main auditorium on the 3rd floor. Engineers, designers, sales reps, HR staff, custodians, interns. They sat in rows of padded folding chairs and waited. Gerald walked to the front. No podium. No microphone, just him and a single sheet of paper that trembled slightly in his right hand. Last Monday, I called the police on Ivy Dawson. The room was already quiet. Now it went silent. I had her arrested in front of many of you. I accused her of destroying our servers. I was wrong. He looked down at the paper. Over the preceding 72 hours, while I was unreachable, Ms. Dawson single-handedly defended our systems against a coordinated cyber attack that, if successful, would have compromised the financial data of 4 million clients. She did this alone, without authorization, without support, without a single person at this company answering her calls for help. He paused, swallowed. I owe her an apology, not privately, not through lawyers, Here, in front of the same people who saw what I did to her. He looked up from the paper, found Ivy in the back row. "I'm sorry, Ms. Dawson. I was wrong." The room waited for more. There wasn't more. Gerald folded the paper, put it in his jacket pocket, and walked off the stage. Nobody clapped. Nobody moved. The apology was correct, every word technically accurate, but it landed like a form letter. You could hear the legal team in every sentence. The Ms. Dawson instead of Ivy. The corporate rhythm. The careful distance between the words and the man saying them. Ivy sat in the last row with her hands folded in her lap. She didn't react, didn't nod, didn't stand. She had heard what he said. She had also heard what he hadn't said. That he was sorry for what he assumed about her the moment he saw her. That part wasn't in the script. She left through the side door before anyone could approach her. That night, alone in his office at 11 p.m., Gerald Whitmore did something he should have done a week ago. He opened the forensic report Neil Grayson had compiled. 47 pages of server logs, time-stamped and annotated. Gerald had skimmed the executive summary before the apology. He'd read enough to know the legal facts. But he hadn't read the logs themselves, the raw, hour-by-hour record of what had actually happened inside server room B. He started at the beginning. 11:17 p.m., Friday. First alert triggered. User I.Dawson_intern acknowledges alert within 90 seconds. 11:19 p.m. Dawson initiates diagnostic sweep. Results: coordinated multi-vector intrusion. 11:22 p.m. Dawson calls N. Grayson, IT lead. No answer. 11:24 p.m. Dawson calls P. Archer, CTO. No answer. 11:26 p.m. Dawson calls T. Holloway, direct manager. Call answered. Duration: 47 seconds. Call terminated by Holloway. 11:31 p.m. Dawson calls G. Whitmore, CEO. No answer. Gerald stopped reading. He picked up his personal phone and scrolled back through his call history to Friday night. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 11:31 p.m., 2:15 a.m., 4 a.m. He had swiped every one of them away. He put the phone down and kept reading. The log entries marched forward in relentless detail, hour after hour. Ivy identifying attack vectors, isolating compromised nodes, writing patches from scratch, deploying countermeasures against malware that Pamela Archer, a woman with a PhD in computer science, had called nation-state level. Gerald read the entry for 3 a.m. Saturday. Ivy had contained the first wave and walked to the vending machine. The log showed a 12-minute gap in activity. 12 minutes. That was her break. Her only break for the first 15 hours. He read the entry for Sunday at 2 a.m. Ivy physically disconnecting server racks. The log noted, manual hardware intervention, rack C7 and C9 disconnected to prevent lateral exfiltration via legacy port. No approval chain available. Decision made by I.Dawson_intern. No approval chain available. Because no one was there to approve anything. Gerald read the entry for 3:41 a.m. Monday. The final command. System secured. And then, nothing. No more entries from I.Dawson_intern for 3 hours and 6 minutes. Because she had collapsed at the keyboard. He read the next log entry, 6:53 a.m. Security alert. CEOG.Whitmore reports unauthorized personnel in server room B. Police dispatched. Gerald closed the laptop. He sat in the dark office for a long time. The city lights blinked through the window. He thought about the golf course on Saturday, the steak dinner, the brunch with board members on Sunday morning, while a 21-year-old intern fought alone in a room no one checked on. He thought about the look on her face when the handcuffs clicked shut. He thought about the apology he had given that morning, the one written by lawyers, read from a paper, delivered to a room full of people who could feel how hollow it was. Gerald picked up his coat and drove home. He didn't sleep. The next morning, Gerald walked into the cybersecurity wing, the new section of the 4th floor where Ivy had been given her workstation as part of the agreement. He didn't bring lawyers. He didn't bring an agenda. He didn't schedule a meeting through her calendar. He just walked up to her desk and stood there. Ivy looked up. Her monitor displayed a network topology she was redesigning from scratch. "I read the logs," Gerald said. "All of them. Every hour." Ivy waited. "The apology yesterday was garbage. I know it. You know it. Everyone in that room knew it." He ran a hand over his face. The polish was gone. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I'm not here because of the lawyers. I'm here because I read what you did at 3 a.m. on Saturday morning, and I realized I don't even know who you are. I never asked. I never looked. I saw you in that room, and I decided, in 5 seconds, that you were the problem. Not because of anything you did, because of what I assumed you were." The words hung between them. Ivy's expression didn't crack, but something shifted behind her eyes, a door opening half an inch. "Sorry doesn't undo handcuffs in front of 50 people, she said. Her voice was even, not cold, not warm, just true. "I know. And it doesn't undo 3 days of fighting alone while everyone who was supposed to help me was golfing or sleeping or watching a recital." "I know that too." Silence. The hum of the servers down the hall filled the space. "But you're here," Ivy said, "and you're not reading from a paper." Gerald nodded. "I'm here." Ivy didn't smile, but she gave a small nod, the kind that means, "I hear you. We're not okay, but we might be, eventually. You can start by learning how your own incident response system works," she said, "because right now, you couldn't tell a DDoS from a dial tone." For the first time in 2 weeks, Gerald Whitmore almost laughed. Ivy's new role began quietly. Cyber Security Analyst. Not a title anyone at Greystone had held before, because the company had never taken the department seriously enough to build one. On her 3rd day, she met Elliot Barnes. Elliot was 61, gray-bearded, soft-spoken, and had been a senior infrastructure engineer at Greystone for 28 years. He was the man who had sent Gerald an email at 7:02 a.m. on the Monday of the arrest. A single line. "I'd recommend verifying before acting." Gerald had not opened it until Thursday. Elliot found Ivy in the break room, staring at the vending machine like an old enemy. "Those granola bars kept you alive for 3 days, he said, pouring himself a coffee. "You should send them a testimonial." Ivy looked at him, a beat of surprise. Then, for the first time since the arrest, a real smile. They started eating lunch together. Not every day, but enough. Elliot didn't pry. He didn't ask about the arrest, or the conditions, or the apology. He talked about systems, about architecture, about the way networks breathe, expanding and contracting with traffic like a living thing. One afternoon, he said, 30 years ago, I found a critical vulnerability in our billing system. Reported it to my manager. He ignored it. Reported it to his manager. He told me I was being dramatic. I fixed it myself on a weekend. Monday morning, the director asked me why I'd accessed systems outside my clearance level. Ivy looked at him. What happened? Nothing, because the director was a reasonable man who checked the logs first. Elliot took a sip of his coffee. The system doesn't care about your title, Ivy. It doesn't care about your badge or your salary or what you look like. It only cares whether you know what you're doing. And you do. Ivy's notebook was scanned, digitized, and formatted into Greystone's first official incident response playbook. 112 pages. Every protocol she'd taught herself, every decision tree she'd mapped in the margins of a $2 composition book, now a company standard document distributed to every engineer on staff. The cracked cover of the original was placed in a glass frame on the wall of the new Cybersecurity Operations Center. Below it, a small brass plate read, "Written by Ivy Dawson, used when no one else showed up." Gerald walked past it every morning on his way to his office. Every morning he paused. Not long, just a second. Just long enough to remember. In a meeting with the board the following week, Gerald introduced Ivy for the first time. Not as the intern from the incident. Not as our cybersecurity hire, he said. This is Ivy Dawson. She's the reason 4 million people still have their savings. And she's the reason I still have a company to walk into every morning. Ivy stood, nodded once, sat back down. Elliot Barnes, sitting 2 chairs away, didn't say a word, but he caught her eye across the table and raised his coffee cup exactly 1 inch. That was enough. The video hit the internet on a Wednesday afternoon at 2:47 p.m. Karen Belford had held on to the footage for 12 days. She'd filmed it on her phone that Monday morning. Shaky, vertical, 43 seconds. Ivy Dawson in handcuffs. 2 officers gripping her arms. Gerald Whitmore pointing from the doorway. The lobby of Greystone Systems bright and sterile behind the whole ugly scene. You could hear someone laughing in the background. You could see Ivy's face, exhausted, hollow, bewildered, as they marched her past the reception desk and through the glass doors into the parking lot. Karen posted it with 4 words. This happened at work. Within an hour, it had 10,000 views. By dinner, 500,000. By midnight, 12 million. And by Thursday morning, the phrase #Justice for Ivy was the #1 trending topic in the United States. The internet did what the internet does. It moved fast, it moved loud, and it moved in every direction at once. The first wave was outrage. Pure, white-hot, unanimous outrage. The clip was shared by civil rights organizations, tech industry watchdogs, cybersecurity forums, and every major news outlet from coast to coast. CNN ran the headline, "Black Intern Saves $200 Million Company, Gets Arrested for It." MSNBC brought on a cybersecurity analyst who reviewed Ivy's server logs on live television and called her work the most impressive solo incident response I've ever seen in 20 years. The clip played on loop behind every anchor desk in America. The second wave was personal. People found Ivy's LinkedIn profile, her community college transcripts, her online course history, 247 hours of cybersecurity training, all self-funded on $40 a month. Screenshots of her notebook pages circulated, leaked by someone inside Greystone. Handwritten diagrams, flowcharts, attack trees drawn in blue ballpoint ink. A retired NSA analyst posted on X, "This woman's notebook is better than most classified incident playbooks I've reviewed. She built this knowledge entirely on her own, on an intern's salary. And they put her in handcuffs for using it." Gerald Whitmore became the most hated man on the internet overnight. His photo was everywhere. Golf course photos pulled from his country club's social media. His LinkedIn headshot turned into memes. His wife's Instagram, previously private, was found, screenshotted, and shared. Photos of their Saturday brunch at the terrace, their Sunday mimosas on the patio, their Monday morning smoothie bowls arranged on marble countertops. All time-stamped. All while Ivy was alone in a server room, fighting for his company with Red Bull and a $2 notebook. He was eating Eggs Benedict while she was saving 4 million people's life savings. Went viral as a standalone quote. It wasn't precisely accurate, but precision doesn't matter when the fury is that hot. Greystone's stock dropped 9% by Friday close. 3 institutional investors requested emergency calls. The company's PR firm issued a statement so bland it made things worse. Then the third wave came, and the third wave was poison. It started in the darker corners of the internet. Anonymous forums, conspiracy threads, bot-amplified accounts with no history and no followers. The narrative flipped. Ivy wasn't the hero. Ivy was the hacker. How did an intern know exactly how to stop a nation-state attack? Because she planned it. Convenient that she just happened to be alone that weekend. Convenient that she just happened to have the skills. This was an inside job. She planted the malware herself and then saved the company to look like a hero. Classic false flag. Wake up! The conspiracy spread faster than the truth. It always does. Within 48 hours, hashtag Ivygate was trending alongside hashtag Justice for Ivy. Cable news ran split-screen debates, grainy headshots of Ivy on the left, server room footage on the right, 2 pundits screaming at each other about evidence neither of them had read. Social media became a battlefield. People who had never heard of Greystone systems, who couldn't explain what a server does, suddenly had unshakable opinions about whether a 21-year-old black woman was a hero or a criminal mastermind. Ivy watched it unfold from her apartment. The new one, the place she'd moved into after the arrest because the old studio felt contaminated. She sat on her couch with her laptop open and scrolled through comment after comment after comment. She's lying. No way an intern could do this. No way. She probably slept with someone to get admin access. Send her back to wherever she came from. Fake hero, real criminal. Lock her up. She closed the laptop, opened it again, closed it. Her hands were shaking. Not the way they shook during the attack, from caffeine and adrenaline, but a different trembling. The kind that starts behind the ribs and doesn't stop. Elliot called her at 9 p.m. Stop reading the comments. I can't. You can. Close the laptop. Watch something stupid on television. Eat something that isn't from a vending machine. I'll be at the office at 7 if you need to talk. She didn't close the laptop, but she heated up soup. That counted. Then it got worse. The hacker group, the same people Ivy had beaten, resurfaced. Not to attack Greystone's servers again, to attack Ivy herself. They doxed her. Full legal name, home address, phone number, her mother's name and employer, her younger brother's high school and grade level. Everything published on a dark web forum at 4 a.m. on a Thursday, and reposted across 20 platforms before sunrise. Ivy's mother called her at 6:15 that morning. Her voice was shaking so hard Ivy could barely understand her. "There are people outside the house, baby, with cameras. They're yelling questions. Your brother won't come out of his room." Ivy packed a bag and was in a hotel by noon. Nora Caldwell arranged private security, a detail that stood outside her door in shifts. The FBI opened a separate investigation into the doxing, but investigations move at bureaucratic speed. Threats move at the speed of a keystroke. The messages came through every channel: email, Instagram DMs, LinkedIn messages from accounts with no photos, and names like John_Smith_9847. "We know where you live. You think you won? We're just getting started." "Nice try, little girl. Next time, there won't be a server room for you to hide in." Ivy saved every single one. Screenshot, timestamp, archive. The same discipline that had saved 4 million accounts now kept her from unraveling. Every threat was a data point. Every data point was evidence. She filed them the way she filed server logs, methodically, completely, without letting the content touch her. But at night, alone in a hotel room that smelled like bleach and recycled air, the discipline cracked. She sat on the edge of the bed with the lights off and stared at the wall, and wondered whether staying in server room B for 72 hours had been the worst decision of her life. The congressional inquiry came 3 weeks after the video went viral. Senator Alice Pemberton, ranking member of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security, had watched the story build from trending hashtag to national security conversation. The cybersecurity angle was undeniable. A mid-size financial technology firm had suffered a near-catastrophic breach, and its only defense had been a single unpaid intern with a composition notebook. The committee wanted answers. About corporate negligence, about cybersecurity standards in the financial sector, about what happens when the defense of critical infrastructure depends entirely on someone the system doesn't respect enough to pay a living wage. Ivy was called as the primary witness, Gerald Whitmore as the second. Greystone's board convened an emergency session the following day. 8 directors around a mahogany table, and the mood was controlled panic. Stock had dropped 14% since the video. 3 major clients had demanded independent security audits. 2 others had frozen their contracts entirely. A class action inquiry was forming, not from breach victims, since there was no breach, but from shareholders claiming negligence. The board's directive to Gerald was unanimous and precise. Distance yourself from the intern. Frame the incident as a systemic process failure. Announce reforms. Do not personalize responsibility. Gerald's congressional prep attorney, Philip Strauss, $900 an hour, 0 losses in Senate hearing preparation, arrived at Greystone on a Monday morning with a leather briefcase and a 70-page strategy document. He laid out the playbook over 2 hours. You go in composed. You express concern for cybersecurity broadly. You announce the reforms already underway, the scholarship fund, the new department, the audit, and you avoid any language that could be interpreted as personal fault. The intern is a sympathetic figure. Don't challenge her, but don't elevate her beyond a dedicated employee who exceeded the scope of her role. That's your phrase. Memorize it. Gerald sat behind his desk and listened to every word. Through the glass wall of his office, he could see the 4th-floor cybersecurity wing, Ivy's workstation, the framed notebook on the wall, the brass plate beneath it. He thought about the logs he'd read at 11 p.m., the 12-minute break at 3 a.m. Saturday, the 3 phone calls he'd swiped away like gnats. The look on Ivy's face when she told him, "Sorry doesn't undo handcuffs." He thought about what Philip Strauss was asking him to do. Stand in front of the United States Senate and describe the woman who saved his company as an employee who exceeded her role. "No," Gerald said. Strauss looked up from his notes. "Excuse me? I'm not distancing myself from her. I'm not calling it a process failure. The process didn't walk into server room B and put a 21-year-old woman in handcuffs without asking a single question. I did that." He stood up. "And if I walk into that hearing and hide behind systems language and legal phrasing, I'm doing the exact same thing I did that Monday morning. Making a decision about who she is without looking at what she actually did." Strauss closed his portfolio slowly. "I'll draft an alternative statement. But for the record, Gerald, this is against my professional advice." Noted. The night before the hearing, Ivy sat cross-legged on the hotel bed and opened her notebook one more time. She turned past the network diagrams, past the attack trees, past the incident response flowcharts and the patches she'd written in the dark at 2 a.m. She went all the way back to the first page, written on her first day as an intern at Greystone Systems, 3 months and a lifetime ago. 5 words in blue ballpoint ink. Prove them wrong. Every day. She closed the notebook, slid it into her bag, set the alarm for 5 a.m. Nora Caldwell called at 10 p.m. "How are you feeling?" "Tired." "Good. Tired people don't overthink. Just tell the truth tomorrow, Ivy. It's all you've ever done." Elliot texted at 10:30. "You've got this. And if the senators give you trouble, just explain the ransomware encryption to them. They'll surrender in 30 seconds. Ivy almost smiled. Almost. She turned off the light and lay in the dark, listening to the low hum of the hotel air conditioning, a sound not so different from the hum of server room B, the room where everything started. Tomorrow, she would walk into a Senate chamber and tell her story to the entire country. The hearing room in the Dirksen Senate office building seated 300 people. Every seat was taken by 8:30 a.m. Camera crews lined the back wall. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, BBC, Reuters. Photographers crouched in the aisles with lenses the length of a forearm. The press gallery was standing room only. Outside, a line of people who couldn't get in stretched down the marble corridor and around the corner, watching the live stream on their phones. Senator Alice Pemberton called the session to order at 9 a.m. sharp. Silver-haired, reading glasses on a chain, voice like a scalpel. She sat at the center of a raised wooden dais, flanked by 6 committee members. Below them, a single witness table with 2 chairs, 2 microphones, and 2 glasses of water. Ivy Dawson walked in at 8:57. She wore a navy blazer she'd bought at a thrift store 2 days ago. White blouse. Her mother had sent her a pair of small gold earrings overnight, the ones her grandmother wore to church every Sunday for 40 years. Ivy put them on in the hotel bathroom that morning and looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Nora Caldwell walked beside her. Elliot Barnes sat in the gallery, 3rd row, left side. He'd taken a personal day, the first in 11 years. Ivy sat down at the witness table, adjusted the microphone, opened her notebook. The room was loud with whispers and camera shutters. Senator Pemberton gavelled once. Silence. "Ms. Dawson, thank you for being here today. You may begin your opening statement." Ivy had a prepared statement. Nora had helped her draft it. 3 pages, double-spaced, carefully worded. It was sitting in a manila folder on the table. She didn't open it. She opened her notebook instead. On Friday, September 14th, at 11:17 p.m., I was alone in server room B at Greystone Systems when the monitoring dashboard turned red. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. She spoke the way she'd spoken to Detective Wells in the police station. Plainly, precisely, like someone reading coordinates from a map. 14 alerts in 90 seconds. A coordinated cyber attack targeting the financial records of 4 million clients. I called 4 people. My manager, the IT lead, the CTO, the CEO. Nobody answered. She turned a page in her notebook. So I stayed. The room was perfectly still. For the next 72 hours, I defended those servers alone. I identified the entry vector, a misconfigured API gateway that had been flagged 3 months earlier and never patched. I contained the first wave of intrusions by isolating compromised nodes. I reverse-engineered a custom ransomware payload with a rotating encryption key. I physically disconnected 2 server racks to prevent data exfiltration through a legacy port that wasn't on any current architecture map. She paused, took a sip of water. Her hand was steady. I didn't eat a real meal for 3 days. I slept 3 hours on the keyboard. I called the CEO's direct line 3 times. He didn't answer. He was on a golf course. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Pemberton didn't gavel it down. At 3:41 a.m. on Monday morning, the last intrusion attempt failed. The system was secured. 0 data loss. 4 million accounts intact. Ivy looked up from her notebook. And at 6:53 a.m. that same morning, the CEO walked into the server room, looked at me, and called the police. She closed the notebook. He didn't check the logs. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't call his IT lead or his CTO or anyone who could have told him the truth in 30 seconds. He saw a black woman surrounded by chaos with admin access on the screens, and he decided, in that moment, that I was the threat. The cameras clicked in a frenzy. A woman in the gallery pressed her hand over her mouth. I was handcuffed in front of 50 of my coworkers, walked through the lobby, taken to a police station and questioned for 4 hours. The charges were dropped that afternoon, quietly, privately, like an embarrassment to be cleaned up. Ivy's voice didn't waver, not once. Senator Pemberton, you asked me to testify about cybersecurity policy. Here is my answer. She leaned slightly closer to the microphone. The system didn't fail because of technology. The firewalls worked. The monitoring system worked. The alerts worked. Everything did exactly what it was supposed to do. The system failed because the people in charge didn't listen. Not to the alerts, not to the phone calls, and not to the person who was actually in the room doing the work, keeping 4 million families' savings from disappearing overnight. She sat back. I am 21 years old. I was an unpaid intern. I taught myself cybersecurity from online courses I paid for with money I didn't have. And for 72 hours, I was the only thing standing between a criminal organization and the financial lives of 4 million people. Not because I was asked to, because no one else showed up. The gallery erupted, not in applause, in something rawer than applause. A sound that was half exhale, half cry. Senator Pemberton let it run for 5 full seconds before she gavelled the room back to order. Her eyes were bright behind her reading glasses. Thank you, Miss Dawson. Gerald Whitmore was called to the table 40 minutes later. He walked in through a side entrance. no entourage, no corporate attorneys flanking him. Philip Strauss sat in the back row with his alternative statement in a folder, the one Gerald had requested instead of the damage control script. Gerald hadn't read it. He sat down, adjusted the microphone. He did not open a folder or a binder or a prepared statement of any kind. Senator Pemberton looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Whitmore, you've heard Miss Dawson's testimony. Do you have a response?" Gerald leaned forward. "Everything she said is true." The room went quiet again, a different quiet than before, surprised, uncertain, waiting. On the morning of September 17th, I walked into server room B and saw a young woman I didn't recognize. I saw cables pulled from racks. I saw screens running code I didn't understand. And I made a decision in less than 5 seconds that I will regret for the rest of my life. He paused. His hands were flat on the table. "I didn't check the logs. I didn't ask her a question. I didn't call my IT lead, who was 11 minutes away from confirming that Ms. Dawson had single-handedly prevented a $200 million catastrophe. I called the police, and I told them she was destroying the system she had just saved." He looked directly at the committee. "Senator, you can call it a process failure. My board would prefer that. My lawyers would prefer that. But it wasn't a process failure. It was my failure. I looked at Ivy Dawson and I saw what I expected to see, not what was actually there. That's not a broken policy. That's a broken assumption. And it's mine." A senator on the far left of the dais, a man who had been stone-faced for the entire session, slowly removed his glasses and set them on the desk. "She called me 3 times that weekend," Gerald continued. "I saw the calls. I ignored every one. While she was fighting to save my company with no food and no sleep, I was playing golf and having brunch. That's the truth. It's not comfortable. It's not defensible. But it's what happened, and she deserves to hear me say it in a room where the whole country is listening." Gerald sat back. "Ms. Dawson asked me for 4 conditions: a public apology, a scholarship fund, a real position, and an honest audit. I agreed to all 4, not because my lawyers told me to, but because every single one of them was right. And I should have offered them before she had to ask." The hearing concluded at 12:47 p.m. The FBI presented its preliminary findings. 3 suspects, identified in Eastern Europe, linked to an organized cybercrime ring responsible for breaches across 11 countries. Greystone Systems was fined $4.2 million for cybersecurity negligence, a penalty reduced by 60% due to, in the committee's words, the extraordinary and uncompensated actions of Ms. Ivy Dawson. Karen Belford, the woman who had filmed the arrest, released a public video statement that evening. She sat in her living room, no makeup, no filter. Her voice cracked twice. "I stood there that morning, and I filmed the worst moment of someone's life. I didn't help her. I didn't say a word. I watched them put handcuffs on a woman who had just saved every single one of our jobs, and I laughed. I posted that video because I thought it was content. I didn't think about what it was doing to her." She wiped her eyes. "Ivy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't speak up when it mattered. I'm sorry it took a Senate hearing for me to understand what you went through." The video got 2 million views. The comments, for once, were kind. 6 months later, the 4th floor of Greystone Systems looked nothing like it used to. What had been a storage wing, old monitors stacked against walls, boxes of cables nobody wanted to sort, a broken copier that had been getting fixed since 2019, was now the Cybersecurity Operations Center. Glass-walled, 12 workstations, a real-time threat monitoring dashboard that covered an entire wall in blue and green light. 3 full-time analysts, 2 senior engineers, and a 21-year-old head of cybersecurity who still kept a composition notebook on her desk. Ivy Dawson didn't get the title because of the headlines. She didn't get it because of the Senate hearing, or the viral video, or the public pressure that followed. She got it because in the 4 months after the congressional testimony, she rebuilt Greystone's entire digital defense infrastructure from the ground up. New firewall architecture, redesigned access protocols, an automated incident response pipeline that could detect, isolate, and neutralize threats in under 90 seconds. Built on the same principles she'd scrawled in the margins of a $2 composition book during late-night study sessions in a studio apartment. She wrote the code herself, tested it herself, documented every decision in language that a first-year intern or a 52-year-old CEO could understand equally. The board didn't appoint her. They didn't have to. Every engineer on the 4th floor already reported to her. It had happened naturally, the way authority flows toward competence when no one is paying attention to titles. Gerald signed the paperwork on a Thursday afternoon. He walked it down to her desk personally instead of sending it through HR. Head of Cybersecurity, he said, setting the folder down. Salary, benefits, equity package. It's all in there. If anything doesn't look right, tell me, and I'll fix it. Ivy opened the folder, read the first page, looked up. This is more than Neil makes. Neil didn't save 4 million accounts in 72 hours. She almost smiled. Almost. I'll review it tonight. Take your time. Gerald paused at the door. And Ivy, it's not enough. I know that. But it's a start. The Dawson Initiative launched on a Saturday morning in October. $2 million. 40 scholarships per year for students of color pursuing cybersecurity degrees and certifications. Full tuition, books, and a living stipend. Named not after the company, not after the CEO, after the woman who made it necessary. The launch event was held at the community college where Ivy had taken her first programming class 3 years earlier. A cinder block building with fluorescent lights and vinyl floors, the kind of place that doesn't show up in glossy university brochures, but produces people who know how to work. Ivy stood at a podium that was slightly too tall for her. Behind her, a banner read, "The Dawson Initiative, Cybersecurity Scholarship Fund." In front of her, 150 people sat in folding chairs, students, faculty, parents, a handful of reporters. Her mother was in the front row. Her younger brother sat beside her, wearing a tie for the first time in his life. He kept pulling at the collar. Ivy didn't give a long speech. She never did. 3 years ago, I sat in a classroom in this building and learned how to write my first line of code. I couldn't afford the textbook, so I borrowed one from the library and copied the chapters I needed by hand. She held up her notebook, the original, the one with the cracked spine and the coffee stains. This is where it all started. Every diagram, every protocol, every decision I made during those 72 hours came from things I taught myself in rooms like this one. She looked at the students in the audience. Nobody handed me a career. Nobody opened a door and said, "Come on in, we've been waiting for you." I built my own door, and it almost got me arrested. A quiet laugh moved through the room. But I'm not standing here to tell you it was worth it. I'm standing here to make sure you don't have to do it alone. The first 15 scholarship recipients were announced that afternoon. Ivy shook every hand, She signed every certificate. When a 17-year-old girl in the back row asked if she could see the notebook, Ivy walked over and put it in her hands. "Careful," she said. "That thing saved a $200 million company. It deserves some respect." The girl held it like it was made of glass. Elliot Barnes was promoted to VP of Engineering 6 weeks after the hearing. He hadn't asked for it. He hadn't campaigned for it. The board offered, and he accepted, with the same quiet steadiness that defined everything he did. His acceptance speech at the company all-hands was 11 words long. "Ivy Dawson taught this company more in 72 hours than I did in 30 years. He sat down. The room applauded. Ivy, sitting in the second row, shook her head and mouthed, "That's not true." Elliot caught her eye and raised his coffee cup exactly 1 inch. The same gesture, the same man, the same wordless language they'd spoken since the day he found her staring at a vending machine, like a war veteran. They still ate lunch together. Not every day, but most days. They talked about network architecture and threat modeling and the way encrypted traffic behaves under load. Sometimes they talked about nothing at all. Sometimes Elliot told stories about the early days of the internet, when servers filled entire rooms and a firewall was literally a wall. Ivy listened the way she did everything. Completely. Gerald Whitmore was still CEO. Some people thought he shouldn't be. The internet had opinions. The board had discussions. But Gerald stayed. Not because he talked his way out of it, but because what he did after the mistake mattered more than the mistake itself. He changed the emergency response policy personally. Every after-hours alert required a response within 30 minutes from a minimum of 2 senior staff. No exceptions, no voicemails, no "check it Monday." He signed the policy in front of the full company and posted it on the wall outside his office. In his wallet, behind his driver's license, he kept a small card. On it, in his own handwriting, were 3 phone numbers and 3 timestamps. 11:31 p.m., 2:15 a.m., 4 a.m. The 3 calls he didn't answer. He looked at the card every morning, not as punishment, as a compass. One evening, 3 months after the hearing, Gerald stayed late. The building was empty, except for the night security team and the glow of the operations center on the 4th floor. He walked past server room B. The door was open. New equipment, new cables, new everything. But on the wall, in a glass frame lit by a small overhead light, was Ivy's original notebook. The cracked spine, the coffee-stained cover, the pages filled with diagrams drawn in blue ballpoint ink at 2 a.m. by a woman nobody believed in. Below it, a brass plate. Gerald had read it 100 times. He read it again. Written by Ivy Dawson, used when no one else showed up. He stood there for a long moment. Then he turned off the hallway light and went home. The last image is this. A Tuesday evening, late autumn. The sun is setting through the glass wall of the Cybersecurity Operations Center, painting the monitors in amber and gold. Ivy Dawson sits at her workstation. The threat dashboard is calm. All green, all quiet. Her team has gone home. The coffee in her mug has gone cold. On her desk, next to her keyboard, is a new notebook. Black cover, uncracked spine. First page, blank. Waiting. The original notebook is on the wall behind her. She doesn't need it anymore. Everything in it lives in the system now. The protocols, the flowcharts, the patches, the playbook. What was once the private knowledge of one woman working alone in the dark is now the foundation that protects 4 million people every single day. Ivy opens the new notebook, picks up a pen, writes 5 words on the first page, the same 5 words, in the same blue ink, in the same block letters.
Prove them wrong. Every day.
She closes it, looks out through the glass at the server room. The lights blink green. Steady. Safe. Hers. If someone told you a 21-year-old intern couldn't save a $200 million company, share this story. Drop a comment. Have you ever been the only person who showed up when it mattered? Hit subscribe and turn on that notification bell, because the next story might hit even harder. Ayo, showing up when nobody asked you to? That's not being extra. That's character. The world will judge you before it knows your story. Keep showing up. Keep proving them wrong. Every single